Hello, everyone. Today we are going to have a talk about repression, arrests, and overall the current political situation in Russia with Alexey Ovsienko, a member of the Russian Libertarian Party. In the end, you can also ask questions for Alexey. So, hello. Yeah, you can start.
Yep. Hello again. As I've been already introduced, yeah, my name is Alexei. I'm in the Libertarian Party of Russia. Used to be the secretary. Nowadays just an ordinary activist in the party, and I will try to enlighten you on the current affairs as they stand in Russia in regards to politics. Well, to start with, I want to go just a little back in time, a few years, like what it was before the war, immediately before the it was and before COVID, because these two events, COVID and then war, changed the political landscape in Russia significantly. We went from having an authoritarian state that suppresses political opposition but doesn't eliminate it. We went to a situation where illegal politics became impossible. Before COVID started, the increase in political repression against opposition was already noticed for quite a few years. I became involved with politics and libertarianism in 2012, and back in the day, it was perfectly legal to go protest, have a single protest, holding a sign or whatever, and protest anything. If you were alone, you didn't have to ask for any kind of authorization for this protest. You didn't have to inform the police or authorities. You could just take your sign and to go somewhere and protest something. The police would probably come up to you, ask you a couple of questions, and buzz off. It was okay. I did that. From 2012 to fast forward to 2019. In 2019, we found ourselves in a situation where it was still illegal to protest individually. It was even possible to organize rallies, and it was possible to participate in elections. But rallies had to be sanctioned. You had to apply for authorization from the authorities of the city of Moscow, in my case, and uh, authorities of other regional authorities. If we're talking other cities, we had to apply for a for authorization of a rally. We had to tell the authorities exactly how many people are going to be present, where do we want to protest, and they could deny us this place and this date at will, basically at will. But sometimes it was possible to find a compromise with them, to hold rallies, to protest. For example, my party protested the attempt to ban Telegram in Russia, and it was a huge rally and it was a huge success. Everybody was very proud of it. Now, then we got hit by COVID. But already back in 2019, severe sanctions you could face severe sanctions for breaking the laws. For example, if you held an unauthorized protest, and if the authorities deemed you to be organizer of the unauthorized protest, you could face up to 10 days of arrest, probably even more if I'm not mistaken. And our then chairman Sergei Boyko served 10 days arrest because they accused him of breaking regulations regarding organization of rallies. When the COVID hit, basically it was used as an excuse to ban all political rallies and even individual protests. And now, when we're faced with this crisis, this war in Ukraine, the authorities still use this pretense of COVID, anti-COVID measures to basically stop anyone from holding a rally. On the 24th of February, when this whole thing started, our party immediately applied for authorizations to hold for several cities. All were denied outright. And we do not dare to hold unauthorized rallies, because if we do, then everybody present will be under threat of arrest, fines, and those who are deemed to be organizers, and they can make anyone an organizer. Like, basically, anyone who's talking on the social media and saying we're going to have a protest tomorrow. Anyone making such statements, they can accuse him of being an organizer of an illegal rally, and then fine him severely or jail him for 10 to 15 days of arrest. So basically, all rallies, nobody even talks of rallies nowadays since the war started. It's impossible to get one authorized, and unauthorized rallies are met with arrests, fines, sometimes beatings, but that is still rare in Moscow. Police still somewhat behaves. Individual protests here in Moscow are basically made illegal. When the war started, they made it illegal to protest it. They invented a new regulation, a new law, and if you protest the war, like for example, go out on the street with a sign saying "No war," they will accuse you of what they call discrediting the army. They call it, and this carries a fine or days of arrest, 10 to 15, if I'm not mistaken. Mostly, individual protests are met with fines. For example, a friend of mine went out to protest, and she got fined. She managed to walk the streets with a sign, with an anti-war sign, for a couple of hours. Then the police finally noticed her. She got detained and then fined, I believe, a rather small sum of 30,000 rubles. This is nowadays around $500. No, slightly less, probably several $100, something like that. But that's just because he was the first time. She was detained for protesting the first time, and usually they fine you, but not too harshly. If you are a regular, if they know you've been protesting before, if they know you are a member of political opposition and you have been active before, then probably they will take more severe measures. First of all, so the second time you get detained, they'll probably arrest you for 10 days or so. And if you get detained several times, then it carries a criminal sentence. So, you can actually get jailed for several years for repeated unauthorized protests. And with this war and with this new legislation, they can put you in jail for a very long. It carries a very long prison term. I believe like up to 15 years if you insist on like discrediting the armed forces and if you persist. But such long sentences hasn't been implemented, as far as I know, up to this day. They still practice only like small fines, arrests, and small sentences. They haven't used this harsh measure. Also, like what can they do to, and what do they do to intimidate people? If you are a known political activist and you're known to attend rallies and you know to organize rallies, then if they know if the police knows something's going on, something's planned for some date, for example, even just on weekends. These days, it's just any weekend they suspect there's going to be some anti-war protest somewhere. So they try to intimidate activists beforehand. Police may come to your door and ring a bell, demand that you talk to them, and they will try to give you a warning, a written warning. It has no legal power, of course, but it's just a written piece of intimidation. Like, please cease and desist from going out to protest. But the very fact that a policeman comes to your home is distressing and annoying, of course. Then sometimes, for example, this happened to our present chairman, Boris Speaking. He had his home search. They started a criminal investigation against somebody, and they made him a witness to this criminal investigation. So they had his home searched. This is a pretty harsh, intimidating measure because they turn your whole house upside down. And I've had friends who had their home searched. This is very nasty. They turn your house upside down. They take away any electronic equipment they find, cell phones, computers, thumb drives, anything. They take it all with them, and you are not going to see these devices back for for many months. So you basically have to buy yourself a new computer and new cell phone and new everything. This is really bad. Fortunately, our chairman Boris managed to hide most of his stuff beforehand. He knew people, the police will come to search him. So he managed to hide most of his stuff. That was fortunate for him, but in general, it's very nasty. One thing that happened to me a few years back. Sometimes they come to recruit you. This is what happened to me. FSB and the police. The police has a special department that deals with what they call extremists. The political activists, and they work closely together with FSB. Those guys, they came to me and tried to recruit me to become an informer, like the good old Stasi guys, like these Germany, exactly like they write in the books. They tried to threaten me. They tried to make me talk. I told them to buzz off. I told them I'm not going to talk to them. That if they want to talk to me, they must give me a written summons to the police, and I will come with a lawyer. That I'm not going to talk to them. And it was of course very nasty, very distressing, because these people they're really nasty. You really don't want to talk to them. It's like he talked to me like for 10 minutes, and he pursued me. Basically, I was going home, and he was following me, trying to get me to talk. He always kept asking me to go sit somewhere in the cafe with him, and basically his purpose is to make you talk anything. But I told him to buzz off, basically run away from him, and then publicized my story widely. And some of the opposition media that existed back in the day, they ran stories on this thing. And so if they come to recruit you and you tell them to buzz off, and then you publicize widely that this happened, you tell everybody that this happened, then you have no value for them anymore, and they won't bother you the second time. But if you don't, if you become if you let them know that you're afraid, if you let them know that they have something to push you with, then they will come again. And I've heard stories of when they try to recruit someone, and that person refused to talk to them, but didn't make it public that they approached him, and they came again and again, and they'll keep coming until you make it very public that they're trying to recruit you, and this makes you useless for them. These are like the things. Also, one method of intimidation. I'm sure they are still using it, but probably for every story that we know, someone was for every story when we know someone was approached by them. There are probably some stories that we don't know someone was approached. Like the most current things. Like what happened to our guys here in the libertarian movement in Russia. One of our guys in Moscow went out to protest basically a week ago with an anti-war sign, and he got arrested, got a fine, and several days arrest, I believe. Got released after that. My own friend, she, as I mentioned, went out to protest, got fined. Maris Fedukin, as I mentioned, had his house searched. In other cities, people are also protesting. Mostly it ends up with fines or several days of arrest. But this this current situation makes any kind of politics almost impossible. Nobody is there's at present all the opposition for major opposition figures either fled the country, or they are declared what they call a foreign agent. This is also one method of repression, intimidation our authorities use. They can declare some person a foreign agent. What this means for this person is that he suddenly this person is legally obliged to post every time he makes a post, for example, anytime he writes something, even a comment, even if he writes off something about like what he had for dinner on Facebook, he has to precede this post with a disclaimer that he's a foreign agent, a huge a couple dozen of words like this message is being disseminated by a foreign agent and blah blah blah. This has to be posted every time. So we have persons who are declared foreign agents. We have whole organizations declared foreign agents. For example, media outlets like Mediazona, Medusa, many others who are declared foreign agent, and each article they post have to be preceded by this disclaimer. And also, the status of a foreign agent, it carries a lot of added legal responsibilities. They have to, if they're still in Russia, of course, if these people keep operating in Russia, they have to comply with a whole new set of regulations. For example, if you're just a person, a private person like I am, if I get declared a foreign agent, I will basically become not a person but a whole media. I will suddenly have thrust upon me a whole set of legal obligations. I become sort of a media, a one-man media, and people have been subjected to that. And the result is mostly that these people escape the country and they go abroad. So now all major opposition media outlets are either banned or declared foreign agents, and if they operate from abroad, like Mediazona and Medusa. If all major political opposition figures are also either abroad or in jail or even murdered, like Boris Nemtsov has been murdered a few years back. I suppose you know that Alexei Navalny is in jail after several unsuccessful attempts to assassinate him. His organization is mostly destroyed in Russia. It's non-existent. They ceased to operate in Russia and they formally disbanded themselves to avoid endangering their members. And most of their key figures they have also fled abroad. And political life has ceased with the advent of this armed conflict in Ukraine, this war. All political life has ceased. Protests are being punished, and I suppose some would say that these punishments are not that harsh. I mean, like, well, a few days arrest, a fine, that's not too much. But most people are not willing to protest, knowing that this protest is futile, that they will not help anyone by getting arrested for a couple of weeks. This is one of the reasons we don't see real mass protest. There's been significant protesting when this war started, but then it died down because people are mostly they are now resigned to their fate that they cannot change the political course of events in Russia, and these fines that they will get for protesting and arrests they will be futile and will help nobody. And this is the situation we are at. 12th of May 2022. I don't really know what's in store for us, what's in the future, but at present it is, as I said, basically impossible to do legal politics. I don't know what our elections are going to look like when they come, because there must be elections, and our elections were a fraud even before. But what our elections will look like after what's happening in Ukraine, it's even harder to say. So that's about it. Like this is the outline of our situation here. Maybe you have any questions.
Yeah, yes. So when someone has a question, you can speak now. And if no one speaks, I can firstly start with my first question. My question is, I think many of the viewers will be interested. What did the Libertarian Party, what the Libertarian movement in Russia achieved already, and what did they do in Russia? For example, I heard that Libertarian Party was in a parliament once with someone. Overall, what did the Libertarian Party achieve in Russia? Which process maybe they held, or which other political things they did and has achieved, and how many people are there, and so on. So then we can compare a bit with Germany, for example, too.
When I joined the party back in 2012, the party numbered around 300 people all over Russia, and this was the legal limit to start a party in Russia. As some of you may know, in 2012 there was a real turning point in the Russian politics, because that was the year of major protests, major opposition rallies. There was a significant resentment towards the establishment, towards Mr. Putin, and towards his then successor Medvedev. And the political opposition managed to rally 100,000, managed to hold several huge rallies in Moscow in succession, like 100,000 strong rallies. This was a event. This was the year when everybody felt like there's going to be change. There has to be change. There can't not be changed. And some change happened because in that year they relaxed the threshold for registering a party. Before that, you had to have several thousand people in a party for it to become officially registered with the Ministry of Justice. And then they made it just 300 people and you could register a party. This was a minor change, but it was very important for us because we were a party that could try to register, and we tried. But the softening of the political regime in Russia didn't last, and the reactions set in. And although the legal limit is still for to start a party is still 300 people, they don't register parties under all kinds of legal pretenses, for formalities, all kinds of bureaucracy, red tape. They keep finding reasons for not registering a party. So back then, we tried to register a party, and we tried later several times, all unsuccessful. But this was important because the movement started to grow. And back then, several minor magistrates, we managed to elect several minor magistrates. We had a local municipal deputy, Vera Kishanova. You probably heard of her. She was the first elected magistrate in Russia of the libertarian persuasion. She was the first libertarian to hold office. It's a very minor office of the local municipal deputy. They basically have very little authority, but it was something. It was a start. Then others followed suit. There we had from 2012 like 2019, we had several local deputies elected, and we had also managed to elect in a Moscow region, not far from Moscow. There's a town Pushkino, and our then chairman Andrei Shalnev lives in Pushkino, and he managed to get himself elected as a city deputy, and it was a major win because in the little city council, if you get elected to the city council, they have much more authority than the deputies in Moscow. That was a major win for the libertarian movement. Because of course, all these people, they ran as independents because the party, we tried to register the party, but we couldn't. They didn't allow us to get registered. All these people ran as individuals, but the party, of course, used its resources. All the activists, they participated in the campaign. I personally participated in the campaign of Andrei Shalnev. It was very exciting. We won by a large margin. Like from there were 7 mandates in this town of Pushkino, in the local council. There were 7 mandates, and we won the second place. So he got in from the second place. It was a very exciting campaign back then. Everyone was hopeful that this was a great start, because of course libertarianism isn't some popular political ideology. It's pretty fringe politics, political ideology, to be honest. And it was really cool to have a city deputy in the city council, Pushkina, a libertarian, and he managed during his time in office, he managed actually to cut out one of the local taxes. He managed to have one of the local taxes that they had influence on to be set on the lowest possible legal at the lowest value possible. So we could boast that we managed to cut taxes at least in one town in Russia. Now this is of course no big deal on the scale of the whole country, but there were several local deputies elected by our party. Also, in terms of other activities, we managed to hold several significant rallies. The rally for protesting the attempt to ban Telegram, for example, it was a huge event in Moscow. We managed to attract I believe tens of thousands of people. This was a huge event. This was like one of the largest rallies in Moscow since 2012, and everybody was really proud of that. Also, the party holds an annual, honestly, a lot of events. I won't go into detail about all of them, but there are conferences. They were at least conferences, because no one knows what will happen this year with this current crisis. There were annual conferences in Moscow and in St. Petersburg, held with the help of, organized basically by our party and our activists, where we invited speakers from all around the world when it was possible. And then during COVID, it became impossible to invite foreign speakers. But still, there were quite a lot of activities. In terms of numbers, the party grew when I was the federal secretary. It was The position was called the Secretary for the Federal Board of the Libertarian Party of Russia. When I was secretary, we approached the number of 1,000 members in the whole of Russia. Then there was a slight decline, because there was an internal crisis in the party, and some people split from the party. There was a rift between Mikhail Svetov and the rest of the guys, and a certain significant number of people left the party to form their own separate libertarian organization. But still, the party was pretty large by European standards, at least. Of course, we couldn't boast like the numbers the United States, the libertarian parties of the United States have, like in their states. They are huge, but by European standards, I think we were one of the largest libertarian parties in Europe, and certainly larger than let's say Australian guys. There are a few guys in Australia, and they call themselves a party. So this is the rough outline.
Okay, very interesting. So you think how popular is libertarianism in Russia? How do people actually in Russia react to this theory? So I think that, for example, Russians are more ready are more criticizing the government than, for example, Germans that love the government at all, and Russians are more criticizing government, and maybe this is a potential for libertarians. What do you think about it?
Well, we must have no illusions about libertarianism becoming something like a mainstream or even hugely popular ideology in Russia. But I think it has some potential, mostly among the better educated and the more liberal city, intelligentsia, and it has a potential. I think if there were like free elections in Russia, if there was a free media, free elections, if there was a Western type of democracy in Russia, we could have tried to enter the parliament with a few percent support. Like we could probably pass the 3% or 5% threshold, and that would allow us a seat in the parliament. Hypothetically, of course. We tried to put we tried to enter parliament even with this current at our current state of events, not current, but a few years back state of affairs. We tried to put an independent candidate, a libertarian independent candidate, into the parliament, but we failed largely because we hadn't have enough resources, and also because there was widespread election fraud. But I believe what we could realistically hope for, in case we had freedom, in case we had free politics, free media, democracy, and all that, we could hope for several percent support. It's not going to. It's never going to be a really like mainstream popular ideology, but there are people who support it. Even now, there are people who support it. And as for Russians not really trusting the government, of course, Russians don't trust the government at all. But and of course, it's easier to hate your government when it's corrupted, when it's corrupt, when it's inefficient, when it's ran by thugs and mafia. The Russian government is really easy to hate. So I can sort of understand why in European countries it's not so widespread of a sentiment when your government is like more or less efficient and more or less democratically elected. It's way harder for a regular guy to hate it than when you have a Russian government that's awful and corrupt and bloodthirsty.
Yeah. Also, what I meant is something like I was born in Russia, for example, and I lived there, and I know people there. And what I saw is that people are more not trusting the government at all. Even the people in the government, I think they are more like on their own. For example, in Germany, the people are trusting too much the government, and they think the government will solve their problems. And in Russia, they understand, some people, that government won't solve their problems. But I wouldn't agree on the point that the governments in European are efficient or something. But yeah, but in comparison with Russia, of course, it is better. For all that came new, or you can also ask questions. So you have to only speak up and ask your question. Yeah.
You can also write in the voice chat, like I did, with like some symbol for Alexander to see.
All right. Could I
Yeah.
speak up? That's all right.
Yeah.
So, of course, what's always important in a war is where do you get your information from? So it's like, do you like watch Russian state media? And if you don't, where do you get your sources from? It's like from friends in foreign countries, or do you get it from like Discord, something like that?
So, do I understand your question correctly? You're asking where do we get our information about the war?
Yeah, basically.
Well, I can't speak for everybody, but myself, I don't watch television at all, and like most of my friends don't watch television at all. I don't even own a TV set. I certainly don't consume any of the Russian propaganda that's being pumped on TV. Sometimes I listen to the radio, but again, not for information, but just to be aware of the current official uh, official of the official propaganda position. Let's say like this, to know what they're pushing. But as for information, when I about the war, I read in English language and I watch in English language like sources. Sometimes I watch a little bit of Deutsche Welle, but mostly I read a guy called Tom Cooper on Facebook, and if you haven't heard of him yet, find Tom Cooper on Facebook, and he's an analyst from Austria, I believe. He's like a military historian, and he made a name for himself with this war because he, like, as a military historian and expert, he has like he's written quite a lot of books on the all kinds of military subjects before, but now he's posting updates on what he can make of what's going on in the during this conflict. And so far, he's been amazingly correct in his predictions, and he's offered brilliant analysis. So this is the guy I rely on when I want to know what exactly is going on there in Ukraine, who wins, where, and what's happening. This is like where I get my, let's say, tactical information. I try to not pay attention to official propaganda either from Russia or from Ukraine because I'm aware that they also wage a propaganda war, and if I check their sources, it's basically again, as with the Russian propaganda, I sometimes check their propaganda to know what's their position, like what they're pushing, what's their message, but not for a fact. This is it basically.
Okay, good. We have also a question in the chat. Johannes asks, the Russian economy is being weakened from many sides right now. How good or bad is it condition really?
Well, I'm not an economist. We have a few guys, quite a few. I'd say we have many economists in the Libertarian Party in Russia, probably because libertarianism is so like academia. It's libertarianism in Russia started in the academic circles, basically. But from what my friends in the party tell me, Russian economy is going to suffer. Of course, it's going to suffer severely, but it's not going to collapse. It's a large economy; it will hold. There's not going to be like a severe decline in the standards of living. Probably will lose around 10, maybe 15% of GDP, but it will still not result in like people going hungry or like unavailable. It will not result in basic products and basic commodities becoming unavailable. There will the rise in prices is felt already. There were temporary shortages of some goods, like for example, paper, plain paper that for printers. The price of paper skyrocketed. It's basically one sheet of paper costs $4 now because of the deficit of some chemicals they use to whiten the paper during the production. And they even started producing paper that's not whitened. It's like this brownish color, like in old movies, where they type something on a typewriter on this sort of brownish paper. But this also is passing. They're back to normal now. So right now we're not feeling any immediate severe impact. All we're feeling is the rising prices, deficits of some goods, like some commodities. Prices on some commodities rise like several times. Prices on others, they basically stay the same. Some things are like cars, for example. The whole market for automobiles is is down like 80%. It's every month it basically collapses right now because there are no cars being produced in Russia and no cars being imported. And until they get some stuff from China, no cars are basically going to be sold here. The worst, as far as I know, I'm also like a fan of all kinds of aviation YouTube channels, and they all talk about Russian aviation becoming non-existent in a couple of years because of the deficit of spare parts. And but again, this is not something we feel as yet. All we feel now is that the prices are going up.
Okay, interesting. Johannes has a new question. So, what do you think? How likely is a general obligation for all young people in Russia to participate in the war if the conflict continues without successful Putin? And what would you do in a situation like this?
Well, this is one question everybody is asking themselves for last week. There's been rumor of general mobilization. This rumor is not really substantiated, in my opinion. At least I haven't heard any concrete proof that this is on the table in the government. This is so I can only speculate. I can only speculate just as anyone else. But to me, this seems like an unlikely thing. They will, of course, try to mobilize some people, but they will not call it a general mobilization, and they will not advertise it. They will not make it something. They will not make it a propaganda point because this is a really bad PR. If they declare general mobilization, this is going to really this is going to be a PR disaster for the war, for their war effort, because the mood, even though quite a lot of Russians, probably the majority of Russians, they somewhat support this whole war, the actions of the government, but their support is like formal. It's not like they're ready to sacrifice anything. It's not like they're ready to do anything. They just declare their support and hope that the worst things and don't come their way. That the evil will pass them. That they will not suffer. But if they are asked, if they are demanded by law to do something and to do as much as to join the army and go fight, this is going to be a PR disaster. Everybody's going to be really unhappy. Probably people will probably this can trigger protests. This can trigger protests by people who never protested before, by people who are really not going to be happy with this decision. So I don't think they are going to call it a general mobilization, but they will, of course, try to draft people like without making too much noise about sending out draft notices to people and try to keep it under the rug. This is what they're going to do.
Okay. Anybody else with a question? Then I'm going to ask a question.
Actually, I have one.
Oh, okay, Stefan.
Yeah, the symbol was actually not a fake one. I really wanted to ask something. First of all, I want to say thank you for the great presentation, even though it's kind of depressing. Yes, it's inspiring to hear, actually. And I'm asking on the behalf of Max, who had to turn down his microphone because he is recording. So he wants to know, have you thought about leaving the country, like many professionals in Russia are doing currently? And if I add another question at this point, how do you see your future perspective as a party and also personally? In this context, maybe you could also talk a bit about how we as a movement in Germany can maybe help you in some way. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yes, this is a great question. This is what is now on everybody's mind. Leaving the country. A lot of my friends, many of my friends, have already left. Like a good, are really, many of them. I didn't expect so many to leave, but a lot of people in the party, when they heard the news on the 24th of February, they just packed and left immediately. If So all of my friends are somewhere stranded all across Europe. quite a few are in Turkey, in Istanbul, some are in Armenia, some are in Georgia. They are trying to make something of their lives now. And of course, when the sanctions hit, and then when the Russian banking system was cut off from Visa and MasterCard, this was a huge pain in the ass for them, because at least here in Russia, our old Visa and MasterCard cards, plastic, it still works. You can go to the store and buy stuff. But those who left immediately after the war started, when the sanctions hit, when these sanctions from Visa and MasterCard hit, they were really screwed, because they were left with no means to withdraw cash and to use their money. This is what on everyone's mind leaving the country. Of course, I have thought about it. Everybody's thinking about it. Who's against this war? The options. It all comes down to the options. For me, I decided that I'm going to leave if I feel like there's a certainty that I'm going to be arrested or like jailed, or there's going to be a criminal investigation opened against me if I see the signs that they're going to lock me up. But so far, I have not been in any personal danger with even though I like write stuff on Facebook from time to time and voice my political position pretty openly, since I don't have a large following and I'm not like a media figure. So far, I'm not in the. I am personally below the radar. They have a larger fish to fry, so I don't feel threatened. I would try to emigrate if I had options open for me abroad. Like those people who left, they have in demand professions, mostly IT specialists. They can get themselves employed anywhere in the world, and they can leave the country. They can go to some other country and keep working for a Russian company in Russia, as long as they have the means to move their money from Russia to wherever they are. It's much easier for these people to leave Russia, and they do. They do leave in droves. For me, I am a design engineer. I design pressure transmitters for a living, and I need a factory to find it. I need to get if I want to get a job somewhere, I need like a factory. It's, the company the size of Siemens, so it's not so easy for me to find a job abroad. I'm looking at the opportunities, starting to Google, stuff. If there are some opportunities somewhere, probably like in developing countries like Turkey, where they have a large growing industrial sector of economy, probably there could be jobs for me there, something like that. But this is not a decision to be taken lightly. This has to be a well prepared move. If you are not leaving as a refugee if you're not leaving for fear for your safety, then you have to really take care. Look for a job, look for opportunities somewhere, find a place to stay, and so on and so forth. Investigate the legalities, of moving to that country of your choice. But if they do come for me, and if I feel threatened, I will have to just pack up and leave and ask for asylum somewhere. That is something I wouldn't want to do. I have friends who asked for asylum who had to escape the country in the past, and well, they are all okay now. They're doing all right, but it was a pretty nasty experience for them. Some of them weren't really prepared for it. One of the guys I know, he fled Russia, and he had to illegally cross into Finland. He illegally entered Finland and posted on his Facebook like, "I'm in Finland. I'm going to the police station to give myself up to the authorities and ask for political asylum." So he found himself in another country with nothing but his old passport and a cell phone. So yes, this is what's on everybody's mind. But as far as I don't feel like I'm in personal danger. I'm not escaping, and I'm not asking for asylum. I'd rather try to look for opportunities to find a job somewhere and to settle in like properly. And as for what the future holds for Russia, the problem with what we're facing now isn't that the GDP is going to fall 10 to 15%. The problem is that we have no potential for growth. The Russian economy, at least as my economist friends tell me, the Russian economy has no real potential for growth. And if we like fell 10 to 15%, okay, but but if we then continue to develop and to grow 5% a year back, then in 3 years we would be back where we started. Like in 2025, we would be where we fell from in 2022. But this is not going to happen because the Russian economy is not going to grow. There are there's not a single reason, there's not a single hope for it to grow rapidly. We'll have the growth of no more than 1% a year, and this is going to take us forever to recover from this crisis. Even if all goes well, even if the war ends, even if everything's okay, it's still going to take us like 10 years to get back to where we took off. So the future is really bleak for Russia, and I can well understand all those people who are looking for opportunities to move somewhere else.
Okay, and what about the political future? What do you see in political things, not only economics? What would happen next? What could happen next? And could Russia recover from that? And could Russia be a democracy once, or will it be a authoritarian state forever? What do you think about it? What will be in the political future of Russia?
Well, one thing is certain: Mr. Putin is an old man. He's not going to live forever. At least this will bring some change. But of course, I'd like to believe that Russia has the potential to improve politically. But as things stands, of course, this is not a very likely option. If the war drags on, the political climate will continue to deteriorate. Probably it will stay like it is at best, or even deteriorate at worst. I don't really think that Russia can afford a protracted war because in Ukraine, because from what I read about the situation in the Russian army, there is no real resource. There are no resources to continue this war for a long time. This was not this whole invasion. It wasn't designed. It wasn't meant to be a protracted affair. They hoped to achieve their goals in several days maximum, and they are now 2 months into the war. They're starting to deplete their munition, their precision, precision weapons, the missiles, the ballistic missiles, the winged missiles. They have depleted their stocks. They have resorted to using old munitions, older types of munitions from as far back as 1960s. And when that runs out, I don't see how they can replenish their stock. Production is slow. The military, of course, has tons and tons of simple things like shells and tanks and BMPs and cartridges and all that stuff. But this is not This is not what wins modern wars. So I don't think a protracted war is likely. If some sort of if something like a military victory is achieved by the Russian forces in Ukraine, something that Putin can present to the Russian people first and foremost as a victory, as a decisive improvement on the situation from his standpoint. If the Russian military is able to produce something like this, then the chances are that this regime will hold politically, that this regime will hold indefinitely at least until Putin is dead. But if a war is but if something happens that makes it look like that Russia lost this war, like this is a military defeat, if the Ukrainians on the and if the Russian army fails to an extent and the Ukrainian army succeeds to an extent that this looks like a Russian defeat, then there may be opportunities for some sort of political transit, some sort of a political development in Russia, because losers don't tend to stay in power somehow. It's hard to tell how exactly this is going to happen. Again, I'm no expert in the matter, but history tells us losers don't stay in power for long. So maybe this is the chance for improvement. I think this is probably the best chance we have. But of course it's a sad thing because a conflict lost will have a I don't know what's worse for us. What's worse for Russia if the Russian army wins or loses? It's hard to say, honestly. Both outcomes are horrendous to say. to be honest.
So you don't think there's like any major opposition group or like a successor of Putin who would be not as authoritarian as Putin? So like every other person who's going to follow will be as bad probably as Putin currently is.
Well, I think not. If somebody succeeds, if Putin, let's say, dies of natural causes or something happens to him, and if somebody succeeds Putin, I think it's hard to be worse than it's hard to be worse than he is. At least the new man will be younger, and younger people from. I have this impression that that younger people tend to not like this whole debacle quite as much as the older generation. Like even my dad, like people the age of my dad, people the age of Putin himself, the older people, they support this war much more than the younger generation. The younger generation is either indifferent or skeptical, or sometimes they're scared to voice their disagreement. They are conformist sometimes, but I believe if there's a change of generations in the elites, in the political elites, this is going to be beneficial for Russia, and it's going to be a change for the better, even if it's a slight change for the better.
Okay, I have a new question about. I have to ask about the revolution. If a revolution from the top, from this establishment, or from the bottom, also like from normal people, which of them is more likely to happen?
Of course, a revolution from the top is more likely to happen because, like in the history of Russia, there has never been a successful revolution from the bottom. It has always been a revolution from the top, enabled by a mass support and mass sentiment from the people. The elites must be emboldened, must be enabled by a mass dissent, a mass demand for change from the people. But it's still going to happen from the top because that's how it's always happened.
Okay, good. Has anybody else some questions? Yeah, Stefan?
I just wanted to ask, as it probably was overlooked when I first asked, is there any way we can help you from Germany through sharing or promoting some of your content, or to somehow supporting you financially or something?
Yes, this is a great point that I totally forgot about. Yes, of course. First of all, I'm very grateful that you gave me an opportunity to talk, because the one thing that's important for us is to not be excluded from the dialogue. When with this whole canceling of Russia, everybody gets cancelled indiscriminately, no matter if he supports the war or condemns it. And with these sanctions and with it became very hard for people to travel. It became very hard for people to get visas. It became very expensive for people to go abroad. For example, we can't participate. I can't afford to go and to, like, say, maybe you've heard about the event Students for Liberty, the organization Students for Liberty, held in Prague recently. They had their annual conference in Prague this year. I wanted to, before the war started, I wanted to participate. I wanted to come, but then the war started and it became impossible for me. And so I'm very grateful that that I have an opportunity to address people abroad and people in the West. And it's important to let Russians who condemn the war and are inside Russia, not people who have left the country, but people who are still in Russia, to let them participate, to not exclude them from the conversation. Then what else can be done? Of course, you should lobby your governments, and on several points. First of all, I think it's a big mistake to indiscriminately apply sanctions in regards to sanctions that prevent people from going abroad, both for as tourists or for education purposes. I think we should the West should take a page from the old Cold War book. Back in the Cold War, back in the 80s and 70s, there were programs of cultural exchange. In the 80s and in the 90s, then after that, in the 90s, these programs were very much expanded, and the people from Russia got an opportunity to go study abroad. To younger people, this is especially important for younger people. Like school kids from Russia, from Soviet Union back before that, went to live for some time with the families, like let's say in the United States or in Europe. This was important. In today's world, I think this must be made. It is point should be made to continue cultural exchange and dialogue with the Russians, with the younger generation preferably, because like the older guys, even like the guys of my age, they're pretty set in our ways. Like I'm set in my libertarian ways, but other guys like are set in their pro-Putin bullshit ways, and you can't really change them, but you can change their children if you make an effort to address them, if you make an effort to include them in the conversation, if you allow them the opportunity to see the world, to see how to participate in Western culture. This is important. So I would suggest lobbying with your governments to not at least not increase the sanctions already in place that target Russians indiscriminately and prevent Russians from going abroad. Like for example, some people in the West, some politicians propose a blanket ban on visas for Russians. This is a very bad idea. Some visas must be issued, and of course for cultural exchange purposes, and of course humanitarian visas also there must be a process to get them, because people who are escaping persecution, they need an opportunity to legally enter the country where they will seek asylum, and this is important to help them do that. Otherwise, they're risking their lives by crossing borders illegally, and or they're forced to ask asylum in countries that are unlikely to grant it. For example, this is also important. What else? Well, I don't think we need any like financial aid, because first of all, getting financial aid, any kinds of financial aid, getting any kind of money from abroad nowadays, it automatically makes you a number one candidate to be declared a foreign agent and to be repressed and accused of almost like being well nigh being a spy. So there are no legal ways to get money from abroad. Of course, there are all kinds of like cryptocurrencies and stuff like that. But material like money, no, that's not what the opposition here needs. But it's not like we are going to have a decisive impact on Russian politics in the near future. So, what else can I think of? I think it's also yes, there probably are quite a few people from Russia now in your country, in Germany. I know even some of my friends are in Germany now. Some people from the Libertarian Party are now in Germany. So you can always communicate with them on the. They know our political landscape, and they can probably come up with some ideas of how it can be helped. Anything else? It's guys, it's getting a little late here, and I think I don't have quite a lot of time left. So maybe like.
Okay.
It was very helpful, thank you. Oh, hey. Das ist rausgeflogen.
Der ist rausgeflogen. Ja.
Oh Gott, Putin hat ihn gefunden. Verdammt.
Mist.
Ja.
Ich wusste,
Ja.
Discord war ein Chill.
Ja, dann noch vielleicht an euch. Also, was meint ihr, wie lange dauert es, bis es ein Ergebnis kommen wird? Also, ist jetzt 2 Monate lang nichts passiert, wirklich? Oder 1 Monat fast?
Er ist wieder da.
Yeah, wait, yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm back.
Hello. Yeah, what happened?
I don't know, something like something got me disconnected, I believe, or something like that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. We thought that you would be kidnapped by Putin.
Yes,
already, but
no, but I'm but it's really getting late. I think I don't have much time left. I must be like going soon. It's getting late.
Okay, good. Okay, so yeah, that was very interesting.
Could I ask,
Maybe you can turn on the camera.
one short question? Maybe I can turn on my my camera to be like more transparent. I wanted to ask, just very shortly, briefly, how many persons are you in the party?
Currently, I don't know the exact number currently, but because it's been some time since I had access to the main base of the party members, but I believe that nowadays it's at least 500 people, at the very least, probably more.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good. Okay, so then if you don't have much time left, then I think we will end this. We will stay in contact, of course, and for example, we could for example, someone from your party invite one of ours to make, for example, a presentation about Germany, or something else, an other event. And yes, so it was very interesting. Thank you for your talk with us, and see you next time, I think. Yes?
Yeah. Okay.